Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Vinitaly International Academy, announcing the 24th of our Italian Wine Ambassador courses to be held in London, Austria, and Hong Kong from the 27th to the 29th of July. Are you up for the challenge of this demanding course? Do you want to be the next Italian Wine Ambassador? Learn more and apply now at vinitalyinternational.com.
Welcome to this special Italian Wine Podcast broadcast. This episode is a recording off Clubhouse, the popular drop-in audio chat. This Clubhouse session was taken from the Wine Business Club and Italian Wine Club. Listen in as wine lovers and experts alike engage in some great conversation on a range of topics in wine. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinepodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. And remember to subscribe and rate our show wherever you tune in.
Welcome to Ambassador's Corner. I'm Joy Livingston, standing in for Stevie Kim. Stevie is in Tuscany right now, hopefully having a wonderful day. It is so warm up here, so I can't imagine what it's like down there. So anyway, here we are. It is 6 p.m. in Verona, Italy. And today on Ambassador's Corner, we have Cedric Izri interviewing Frank Cornelissen. So let's see here. Cedric, are you there?
I am, Joy. I am.
Hi. How are you today?
Very, very good. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to interview Frank.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you a couple questions first before we started, because, of course, as Stevie usually does, she's very big on the learning objectives. And of course, my question first would be, how did you discover Frank Cornelissen and his wines?
In fact, that was some years, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I discovered the wine. I have to say that I knew the name far before that, of course. I was usually following what was happening in the biodynamic organic wine world, and I was following a lot some groups in Facebook and in some other places where Frank Cornelissen and his wine were debated, discussed a number of times. But at the time, I had a lot of wines to discover already, so I put that on my tasting list, and I say, okay, I will taste when I have a little bit of time. But it came so often in the group that I say, all right, 7 years ago, I said, okay, I decide to start tasting first as a wine of Frank. So I bought some wine. I started with Susukaru and Mungebel Rosso at the time, and I said, whoa, it looks to be very interesting. And then I continued to taste. So I went to some other cuvée and single vineyard. And in fact, at the time, I was feeling, and I am from Burgundy originally, and I was feeling that kind of earthy elegance, a little bit of austerity that we can find in Burgundy. And I'm not saying here that we would confuse the wines of Frank with wines of Burgundy, but there is something which, to me, was reminding me something about Burgundy. And I say, okay, that's interesting. And this is where I started to really go to taste the wines from Etna. But in fact, at the end of the day, I always come back to the wines from Frank because they have their own personality. And I mean, the biggest producer and the main producers of quality wines on the Monte Etna have also a great personality. But I find something which is a little bit Burgundian in the wine from Frank, and I always come back to these wines to be honest. And also not too far away from now. It was a few years ago. I made a diploma at the University of Strasbourg, and it was dedicated to discovering terroirs through one specific tasting technique, which is called geosensorial tasting. And I made my paperwork, because we have a paperwork at the end of the studies. and I made that on the specific terroir of Etna. And then I could continue to taste Frank's wines, but not only, also others. And I always found this kind of a personality that is a little bit one step a little bit more to some others. So this is how I discovered the wine, and this is why I'm still drinking the wine. And currently, I have on my desk a glass of Chiusa Spagnola 2016, which is very difficult to find these days. But I have that on my desk.
All right. Actually, I didn't really introduce you, and you gave us a little bit of an introduction on you because you just mentioned a tasting diploma just a moment ago, the sensory tasting diploma. I mean, you've done so many things. You've been in finance, and you've done, your family isn't in wine, even though you're from a big wine region, but you got really heavily into wine. And yeah, you've done a lot of different certifications, but can you tell us a little bit more about that sensorial tasting diploma that you took, like the characteristics, the physical characteristics and movement of the wine in your mouth and things like that? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, and in fact, maybe Frank is knows pretty well Burgundy. And in fact, in the old time, I say old times in Burgundy, I speak about the Middle Age in Burgundy. That was a kind of a official charge for some people to recognize the wines of the region. So, for instance, people were in charge to recognize if a wine would be coming from Beaune Romanée or from another place. And in fact, that was for tax reason, because tax was at the time applied on specific villages. And some of the people were specialized in recognizing these wines. And in fact, their tasting technique at the time was not the sensory that we know today, starting with the nose and the color and everything. It was starting with the texture. So what the wine is telling you on the palate. And here we speak about the dynamic of the wine. Yes, we speak about perceived minerality, even if minerality is not something that we usually use, but how the wine is perceived on the palate and texture of the wine, the grain. So all the elements which are more on a physical side, and the guys at the time, they were able to recognize if a wine was coming from Beaune Romanée or from Moret Saint Denis or from anywhere else. And guess what? So when they were tasting, they were using a specific cup which is called a tas de vin in Burgundy. And if you have ever tried a tas de vin in Burgundy, if you put the nose on it, you smell nothing, right? It's very neutral. So everything in Burgundy was at the time based on what is happening on the palate. I'm not saying that I am an expert into that, because I mean these guys have been probably spending years and years and years in learning and knowing the specific terroirs of Burgundy. But at least I have a kind of a preliminary approach to that, and we are developing into that.
Well, I'm sure you will get even more in the know because you're also doing, you just started your Master of Wine program as well. So you're a wine student, Master of Wine student. So you're going to get into it and even more in the next couple of years, I'm sure. All right. So I will now move on to introduce Frank. Frank, are you there?
Yep,
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks.
Great. So why don't I'm going to mute myself so that you and Cedric can go ahead and start your discussion. And at the end, I'll butt in again, and if we have time for questions, we'll do that. Otherwise, we can let's just continue on now and see how it goes.
Cedric, shoot. Ask the questions.
I will shoot. So thanks for being here today. That's a great pleasure for me, and I guess for some of our audience, I think that's a very good day. Maybe I will give some words about what you have done, and then I will shoot some questions. But in your bio, if you see something that you are missing that you absolutely want to say, please feel free. So I will summarize a little bit. So you are born and you are from Belgium originally. And before you moved to Sicily and established your current estate back to 2001, you have been an international wine trader. In particular, I think if I'm correct, you had a quite a good focus in Bourgogne and Bordeaux at the time, probably some others. And I even read somewhere that some of the first one you bought at the time was a mix of 1972 Domaine de la Romaine et Conti bottles. So if it's true, if you have still the bottle, I am very okay to open that with you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we drank them all, and we means me and my father and my family.
And then you move. So you move in 2001. I will ask you some questions about this move. But in 2001, you moved to Sicily, and in particular on the slopes of Etna, and
Yes.
you bought your first bunch of ungrafted vines. And today you are approximately the latest information that I have is you are owning something like 24 hectares, which is
Yeah.
a mix today of vines, olive tree, fruit tree, and vegetables. That's the latest information I have.
Yeah.
And what I would like to add, and that's very personal, is so Frank, for those who are not familiar with Frank, but in the world of organic world, is a kind of pioneer. And I would say today you are like a rock star in certain in certain communities
Yeah.
on
Unfortunately.
maybe. Um, but what is good into that is that you have inspired also many other growers, and I think this is very important for the listener to understand that you have been a pioneer, and then people have been taken you as example for doing their thing. So it's a very nice approach. Your philosophy would be considered extreme by many. I do sense that being the closest possible to nature, I think doesn't seem so extreme so far. So to me, it's completely fine. But you will explain a little bit what it means in a moment, because I will ask you about what you are after by creating an ecosystem.
Okay.
But more important is that we taste that in the glass. So I think for me, we taste that in the glass, and that's very important for me.
Okay.
Guys,
I
right.
believe. I think you're right when you say I want to taste. Let's say a statement or a philosophy in a glass, because basically we produce wine, and so if the wines do not transmit the choices of a producer or a grower, then I would say you're a bit off track. And so I completely agree with you. Ecosystem, what does that mean? It means everything. It means nothing. What I'm trying to find is a balance where man also fits into nature. A vineyard, and when you go back to natural winemaking or the naturalness, there are no vines in a forest. There could be one or two, but you cannot make wine from that. So if you want to make wine, which is a concept from a culture, from man, and not from nature, then you need to have an organized vineyard to be able to work those vines and to also pick the fruit from that. So basically, we're talking about agriculture, which is a cultural activity and not a natural, I would say, achievement or a natural, um, uh, a natural element like a forest. So we're talking about an entirely cultural activity. So trying to create a balance is something important, because when you plant a vineyard, you have to make a scar in a landscape, and a scar means you damage. You're going to damage something, and but everything depends on your consciousness of the fact that you will damage and hurt something, but you will replace it eventually with something else, which is a sign of men of humanity, which is not bad, because today I feel that we tend, and that means the entire society is tending towards making mankind something really awful and bad. We have the choices to make something nice and beautiful, or we can really destroy something like war, or not building everything, just destroying for the sake of destroying. So we have that ability, intellectual, to make choices. So this is really important. And when for me, I personally talk about ecosystem, it's something where we create beauty, which is related to the humankind, which is something special and specific to the humankind, but which doesn't take away from nature and gives something back. Where you have like a status quo, where also the humankind is present, and not just, I would say, boars or bears and then trees and whatever else that comes in. I'm not saying by coincidence, because there is no coincidence, and at least that's my point of view. So we are part of that coincidence, and but we can make choices. We can make it more beautiful or less beautiful. And so, back to the practicality, when you plant a vineyard, you have to make an damage. It's the same like if you want to make an omelet, you have to break eggs. In the end, it's true. In the beginning, you break eggs, and you're maybe people will be absolutely I don't know, pissed off and angry with you. But in the end, when they eat the omelet, it's like, wow, this is good. So that's the same with planting vineyards. It's making omelets, and so you have to break eggs in order to make something beautiful if you give it time. And that's something which is also difficult in today's world, where we need everything fast, furious, and immediate. We live in a very immediate culture, and so it's difficult to transmit values that go into time. So it's a special period with a lot of opportunities, but also, I would say, a lot of um, energies that don't really fit together in today's world. So it's really, that's why it's actually very interesting to live in. I think this world, which is dramatically changing to something where we all search for something better. And so naturalness, attention to nature, organic farming, it all makes part of maybe a vision for a better world, and that is something I want to participate to.
And you do it very well. Before we go a little bit more into the detail of it, um, can you tell us why the hell happened to you back in 2001 that you you left your, let's say, happy life in Belgium, and you decided from one day to another to land in Etna? What was your journey to come to that point?
It's difficult to say that in 2 minutes, but basically, if you go to the essence, I've always wanted to produce wine. First of all, because it was given by my father, and the passion of wine. Now, from the passion of wine, tasting wine, loving wine, to producing wine, that's a big step. But in the middle, there are a few other ingredients, which is the love for mountains, and alpinism, climbing, the touch of mountain, a lot of sports, and my drive to always try to perform better physically, but also in what I do and what I search for. And so I find wine a bit like alpine climbing, a very complete activity where you do something from A to Z. Like wine, you produce the raw material, which you will transform afterwards, and you will talk about it, and you will do promotion, and you can exchange what we're doing now. So this is a very ancient, archaic activity, basically, because normally you outsource. Like, okay, I produce a detail in a component for a car or a computer or whatever else, or bricks for a house. But it's really something complex. It would be like I construct a house, searching and selecting and building all my components to make that house. It's basically the same. So it's a very again, it's a very archaic and antique activity which implements also a lot of people. It's very very intensive. So it's one of the most unique, I would say, professions which are left over. And it's a bit the same when you go alpine climbing. Obviously, from a different point of view, alpine climbing is not just a sport. So you don't have this agonistic competition edge. Actually, there is no competition except for with yourself. You have the challenge with from you with the surroundings. Call it nature. The challenges you look for, and there is adventure, there is camping, there is you can drive it up to the limit of life and death, which gives you an incredible thrill, not because the death, but because of the life issue. So it just kind of fitted with what I was going through. And so this was actually making wine is quite simply an extension of what I was doing, and already in all the 20 or 30 years before that.
And why having chosen the mountain? Is it because you have a mountain, as you mentioned? How did you land here? Was it something that you had in mind already, or was it coincidence?
No, I don't do anything by coincidence. I choose, because otherwise, people or events they choose for you, which I don't really like. And so it's a conscious, or it has been a conscious process, and it still is. And for many things I do, it's a conscious process where I apply a technique of, I call it deduction, elimination. I eliminate the unnecessary, the superficial, and I try to focus on the essential parts of a project. And so this brought me to Etna, but not just to Etna, not the eastern side, but the northern valley of Etna, because we have all the ingredients for great winemaking. There was no monoculture. You had a very intense light and so photosynthesis. The sandy soil. You have different lava flows, which means geologically you have a similar situation to Burgundy, and except from a different point of view, and from a different physical activity, which is volcanic. It's true the soil is very young compared to a clay soil, like or the geological period of Burgundy, but the ingredients basically were all here. The rainfall also. It's not that we are in a desert. Actually, it's pretty green up here. So all the ingredients were here for great winemaking, and that's what I was looking for. And not just the natural winemaking. The natural winemaking is the way, the vision. It's the is an but not the end goal. It's the road to take to achieve the goal to make great, profound wines. And I think I found this here on but a different thing, but we can maybe it'll come in you've got this written down also in your questions. The thing is, when you hit an area like that, the question arises, how long will it take before also Etna becomes rolled over, and just like in Burgundy, will be basically a monoculture. So I don't know, but inevitably, as the human race is here, and starting to plant, and it's up to us to also protect and to try to keep this a naturally balanced environment. And I think we're much more ready to do that today than it was the case in the 1960s or 70s. So times have changed, and so I do believe this will be a really nice area also for the future.
And from that period of 2001, how did you develop your estate? You starting, I think, from a few vines, quite high in altitude. And how did you develop from there to the current state that we see, 24 hectares with a mix? What were the key steps and stages for your development?
Um, Very honestly, I didn't come here to have a winery and to have a business. I just came here to make wine, which is a very different approach. And so the first years were, I call this gardening. Gardening to produce grapes to make wine, and that has lasted until 2002. I think 2002. You see the potential, the ideas, and then you I think it's a problem of most passionately involved people in a project. You tend to lose track of reality, and you just zoom into your I would say imaginary world of what you see ahead of you, and that was the same for me. And so from there on, it's been an incredible journey of changes, absorbing, and it's not experimenting but eliminating it, because you need time to every change. You have one change every year, basically, because you only have one harvest in a year. So it takes so much time to change a number of things, agriculturally, but also winemaking. So it's been an incredible journey afterwards, but the goal was always to do better. And when you want to do better, you need more vineyards, and so you buy more, you rent more. And so today we work 24 hectares, but it is about 15 or 16, which is ownership, and the rest is rent, lease, which will gradually disappear, because we're planting a lot new. So it's a very organic process, although it does seem quite a big change. Actually, it's not. Everything is totally organic. I worked on the first vintage. I worked on my own. And everything on my own.
Thank you for listening to Italian Wine Podcast. We know there are many of you listening out there, so we just want to interrupt for a small ask. Italian Wine Podcast is in the running for an award, the Best Podcast Listening Platform, through the Podcast Awards, the People's Choice. Listener nominations is from July 1st to the 31st, and we would really appreciate your vote. We are hoping our listeners will come through for us, so if you have a second and could do this small thing for us, just head to ItalianWinePodcast.com from July 1st to the 31st and click the link. We thank you, and back to the show.
And then, today we work with, over the whole year, we have 25 employees, which feels perfectly balanced now. So it's I don't see a big change, a big jump. It's all a very, I would say, nice flow, and of growing to something which is making absolutely great and profound wines, and that's the drive, but not, and that is something important, not consuming energy and consuming people and consuming resources, but absolutely investing in durable and sustainable agriculture, which, when I'm not here anymore in 25 or 30 years, that I leave the land better than it was before to our kids.
If we now move a little bit to the specificities of the terroir of Etna, I had the chance to study this a little bit, but of course it doesn't replace somebody who has his feet on the land for 20 years. So, what can you tell us about this specific piece of land, which is northern Etna, about the terroir? So, when we speak about here climate, what are the influences that you have on the vines? Might it be elevation? And we might be speaking also more specifically about the soils. When we say volcanic soil, it covers multiple it covers the diversity of soils, of course. But what can you tell us about the terroir of northern Etna?
It's a question when you would ask that to I don't know, La Loubise Leroy. Can you tell me something about the terroir of Romani or of Burgundy? It's limestone. Here it's basically basalt, which is well, it's not lava. Basalt has different aspects also. So we do not have any limestone. We do not have any clay soil or clay in our soil. So it has high drainage. It is sandy by structure, and it can go from very powdery, sandy to, I would say, rocky in some specific cases. But then we're talking about soil, the upper part. When you go into the subsoil, there are so many numerous differences that it's just, I don't even know what to talk about it. And because we're running analysis on the land we have, but then we need to work with graphs and so. And if you're an agronomist and you know something about chemistry, it's easy and it's interesting to analyze that. But when you analyze it, you don't know anything, because you have to have the wines next to it also. So for us, it's important to understand the chemistry, because we do not have the culture of a great terroir like Burgundy, like in the Côte de Nuit. And the Côte de Nuit has an experience-based, I would say, analysis of the soil, and you have the wines that tell their story. When we hear on a completely new soil like or area with potentially great wines and with a lot of differences in the different sites, uh, well, we will need to go on a scientific. Although in science we can find certain answers, but not all of them. But if we don't go through science, we don't, we miss also a lot of answers to questions. So back to your question, I don't have the answers yet, and I will have a part of the answers, and much more clearly in 5 or 10 years, when we can compare the analysis of the soils over a 10-year time with the wines next to it, with the pHs, with all the other wines also, because our wines is one thing, but the other wines of the same areas, they should also confirm the, I would say, the characteristics of an area. So it's interesting, and they are there because if you taste the wines, they are definitely there. So somebody says like, okay, it's all fried air. Okay, that's possible, and some people have incredible taste, and they are able to taste the subtle differences. Others not, and so yeah, I can understand that people say like, I don't get it. Basically, that's perfectly fine. You just concentrate on other wines, but undoubtedly and absolutely, I mean, crystal clear is that we have an incredible difference in a very very short radius of area, and that is basically due to different subsoils and not because of the vines. We in our case we don't use wood, and so our experience-based analysis, which is called wine, is made in exactly the same way. So all the single vineyard wines are made in exactly the same way, not with wood, but in fiberglass. And so when you taste the wines, the only difference there is the purity of the fruit. There can be a little bit of a difference in the picking time, in the ripeness, the pressing, but it's so close and so tight the last 4 or 5 years, because we have an incredible team. We've got a lot of equipment, and we work spot on on maturity. We work also with a great agronomist, and so we will eventually get to understanding better the soil technically, but from a holistic point of view, and it's It's actually like talking about a piece of equipment in a cellar, or analyzing the chemical components of a soil, which makes me sometimes laugh a bit. But when you taste the wines, then you understand everything, because the wine is a holistic, tactile, hedonistic product of that soil. And undoubtedly, in some cases, it's not. I regard some of the vineyards not up to the level and standard of making single vineyard wines, like in Burgundy, like you can have a Volnau or C, but that's definitely not the level of a Latache or a Richebourg, or I don't know, a Beaumont. And that's the same thing here. And so some areas, I understand now, they have absolute high quality to be bottled as such, because they have a logic to that. Others, they are great for blending, and they have their qualities and they have their logic in the assembled wines. So it's an incredible area, but it'll need another generation of time to be able to give you an absolute scientific answer. And to be honest, you will never get an absolute scientific answer to a holistic and a hedonistic product like wine. That doesn't exist. That would make wine a little bit too simple. Like beer, or like water. And it's just a fascinating part of wine, not because it's better, but it has something holistic and special to it. And you cannot analyze it. You cannot, let's say, reduce it to a few silly components in chemistry.
And this is why we hear sometimes some high quality producers saying that, oh, I made my best wine in a year where it was by accident, or I don't know what I have made differently than sometime sometime in the past. But I mean, it was the terroir giving me the greatest wine I have ever made. I have heard that sometimes. So that
Well,
is something you don't understand sometimes, and that's fine.
yeah, but can I jump in on that one? It's an
Of
interesting
course.
one. Actually, it's more a question of, in some vintages, you manage to make such a thrilling wine, and you don't know why the hell that was. Like, for example, 2011 Magma is such a compelling wine. It's incredible. But afterwards, when you have more experience, and when you want to understand, because there's also the wanting to understand. Like, I talk about, let's say, sensorial and holistic approach, which is very much the case. But I'm also extremely technical and very scientifical. And so when the science and the sensation, the holistic view flows together, then I think you touched base with something great and something totally understandable. So back to what you're saying, there is an explanation. For example, if you take Cheval Blanc 47, why is that such a great wine? Well, because it had a little bit more volatile acidity than it should have had, and it's a stunning wine because of such an incredible vintage with all the components, and so it just really was a compelling wine. So, Rayas 90, for example, why was that so good? Well, because it had a little bit of residual sugar, and it just gave that absolute sexiness, this roundness, this lushness. And obviously, nobody can choose when that wine was stopping fermentation. So if you go to the Rayas 90, I can understand that, because it had a little bit more residual sugar left, which absolutely made that snap thing special. And the 47 Cheval Blanc, I'm sure they missed something in the cellar, but they made something incredibly good. And so now we're hitting another point. I do believe that the greatest wines, or considered greatest wines of the world, are all wines with flaws, good flaws, positive flaws, that have something special, and they represent something unique because of the imperfection. You remember, when you look at a piece of art, a painting, anything, and that represent art, and also in architecture. it's the flaws that define the greatness. Obviously, too many, it's going to be a mess. It's the right amount of flaw.
And that's a very interesting approach. I have to say. I guess drinking a glass with you in your cellar would be interesting if you speak about Raya 90 or Cheval Blanc 47.
I
I think
drank them, by the way.
yeah, yeah, too late.
Well, good for me, but it's not. This one thing I really feel a bit sad about. I come from I was born in '61, and so back to the case of Romani Conti, the mixed case of '72. I bought one. My father also, and I drank them together with my father, with friends, and so those were my learning schools. Like somebody else goes to university in some ways. So those are some of the benchmark wines. But by the way, they were not really the great wines. There were other
Hmm?
wines that really made me think and then really made me go beyond. Henri Jaillet, for example, Clos Parentout. I had the opportunity in Brussels and in a restaurant to have 89 and 90. Well, believe me, 90 was so good, and because 89 was so black, so concentrated, so very much Henri Jaillet or Meo Camuset style, like this cold soak. That the wine was really unpleasant to drink, and the 90, because of this vibrant, incredible big vintage. It was a warm vintage. Henri Jaillet, he just struck it because his technique was perfectly suitable to express that wine to its absolute best. So, if they serve me 89 Gros Parentout, I say like, well, yes, I'd love to have a glass, but if I can choose, please, a bottle of 90, much better. What we're talking about here is that also I have my technique. I have my vision of making wine, but it took me until 2018 to understand that when you fix too much on your technique and you think that is the absolute best or the only, the most unique or the most applicable to express wine, then you're totally wrong. Every day and every vintage, it teaches you to change. And so I believe personally that you should have a goal in what you want to express with your wine, which is either the fruit or it is terroir. But suppose, like in 18, in our case on Lightning, we had such a terrible vintage, and so it was really difficult. So I had to search for fruit because there was no profoundness because of the lack of the richness in the fruit. And so only that thing, it just made me feel really good because I do think that 18 I really interpreted well that vintage. And I didn't follow my usual style of winemaking, so I changed or I just abandoned the classic style, which I could adopt again in 19 in order to make good wine, maybe not the most profound wine, but anyway, the fruit couldn't give profound wines. So I think that flexibility of mind is something that is, that took me a lot of time to understand and to apply. And also, I do believe that I can apply that because I'm not a technician. I love technique, I love mechanics, I love analysis, but I love in the end, drinking a wine and drinking a glass of wine that transmits something, a vibrancy, and a story, a vision, and that is important. So in the end, that's what counts. And so whatever technique it takes, it is important to understand your area, what you want to pull out of your grapes, understand the quality, the concentration of the grapes, and then apply the best technique to achieve that. And that means you have to be a good technician. You have to have a really good sense of environment, and you have to have great intuition. And so you're talking basically about a split personality and a character like I am. And when I think about other people, I think great winemakers, they have a split personality on them. It's just undoubtedly they have intuition, and they have the complete mechanical and artisanal physical part, and next to them. It's a, yeah, call it a complex. Yeah, it's complex people, basically. Although we're basically totally simple. But that's why sometimes my wife says, like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And well, it's not that I'm really complex. I'm just jumping sometimes from one thing to another in the same conversation, and just like, okay, it's for me it's totally limpid and clear, but for other people it's totally impossible to follow. So it's it's funny, actually. It's a great profession anyway.
Yeah. I guess your personality is conscripted in the glass at the end of the day, which is what is
I
interesting.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right.
Coming back to one point we briefly discussed about, which is the ecosystem, or let's say the interaction between the different natural elements.
Hmm.
How did you, and with today probably you have a lot of experience, or you start to have real experience of knowing your land. What kind of interaction are you looking at nowadays when you are in the vineyard? For example, when you plant trees, or when you select, for example, a type of vegetables or a type of crop that you would put in your vineyard. What are the drivers for putting that in practice today?
What I do want to avoid is putting something in an environment which does not belong there. So I love, for example, yuzu, which is how do you call this? It's like it's not an orange or lemon. It's a citrus fruit from Japan, but we do not have the climate here, and it's never been here. So I'm very wary about bringing something into a culture which does not belong here. So what I do like is to find a balance between not just grapes, but also, for example, the small apples, which is called cola e puma cola. It's a variety, a local variety, and there were almonds on the outskirts, and olive trees to also for the barriers of wind, so it doesn't blast through your vineyard and snaps all the shoots of the vines. So there are a lot of natural protections to leave instead of just taking them out and I would say changing an ecosystem, like I call it. So I think that ecosystem is something really basic, very simple. When you live here, it's like, it's around you. And so you can see it and you apply it and wherever you can. So for me, it's something basically natural, and I don't want to plant a vineyard, and unless I prepare a completely new one, I scramble the eggs, I crush it, I do make an omelette, and then after 3 or 4 years, you will see a vineyard with trees on the end of the rows and everything, and so the whole thing gets a form and becomes beautiful again. So that is something I like. So my ecosystem is very, very simple. It's very much based on what there was before and what we're doing here.
And in fact, this is a good point and good conversation, because I, I I had discussion with some vintners in Alsace, for instance, and nowadays there is a kind of movement to come back to something which is more simple. I mean, in the past we had trees, we had a number of natural elements, and nowadays we are speaking again about coming back to that kind of a simplicity, even if it's not simple, right? But simplicity.
Yeah, I think it's a good way. You take again. It's the same principle. What I was talking about before. You take away the excessive part of I would say of basically everything. You just go back to the essence of something, and then you find a really nice and a nice balance. And then you also notice when that grapes, they or fruit in general, they like being with other fruit, because you get this pollination. The ecosystem is that, it's a it's a complex of different things, and so it's nice to watch that. And so it's not nice to cut everything away and to make like an asphalt road. Roads, they're great to drive with a car on, but it's not really a fantastic environment to sit on and to contemplate, and especially not in the warmth and in the summer. So nature is something else.
Speaking about nature, we know that Etna has gained a lot of international recognition for Nerello Mascalese and Calicante. I know that Calicante you usually blend with Grecanico Dorato, but what can you tell us about Nerello Mascalese? I sense that you love this grape, and I think that we can feel that also in the wines. What can you tell you about Nerello Mascalese? Why is it doing so well when planted with conscience on the Etna?
Well, I'll answer you in a different way. My question is, what happened in Burgundy? Why is Pinot Noir such an incredible vehicle for Burgundy? Honestly, I don't really know. It just apparently through the ages and through the centuries, by experiments and by trial and error, this vehicle, because a varietal is a vehicle, has proven and has shown to give good results. So back to Nerello Mascalese. For me, it can be anything. It could also be for me a hybrid varietal, which has a great ability to make profound wines and to make delicate wines. So for me, it's the same like in car racing. It doesn't matter which car wins. It could be a Porsche, a Ferrari, and a Red Bull, and whatever else. It just doesn't matter. The fastest, the best built car wins the race, and that's the same thing with great wines. The best varietal is the one that gives the best results. And so I don't care about Nerello Mascalese, I don't care about Pinot Noir, I don't care about Riesling, anything. I just have them, and so I should make the best choice for the best vehicle to show the terroir. So in this way, I'm a little bit, well, not just a little bit. I'm quite fond of Marcel Dijs, who just goes beyond and says like, okay, terroir rules, not the varietal. And I totally agree. For me, varietal is a car, it's a vehicle. And if I want to win a race, I take the fastest car, period. And the same thing in the winemaking. So if we talk maybe in 25 years from now, before I'm dying, maybe I'm ripping out all the Nerello Mascalese gradually, and I'm just planting something else in it. It's possible. It's a bit provocative as an idea, but if you really think about it, that's basically what happened for the last centuries. So I don't exclude that.
Yeah, I worked a little bit with Michel Dice recently, and in fact, the diploma I had in Strasbourg was under the patronage of Jean-Michel, so I know pretty well that kind of approach.
Here we go.
I am completely.
It's discussable, It's because there is another element which I'm very fond of, and it's history and the past. But let's be honest, the past is past. It's the future we have. Today is already gone. While we're talking, it's gone. We can record it, but then again, we're listening to the past. I'm concerned, and that's really an honest statement. The only thing I'm concerned with is the future. The rest is already gone. It's done.
Speaking about the way you are making wine, so you were saying that you have a winemaking which is pretty much the same for all the wine. I have written an article on which is probably issued these last days on the Purple Page from Jensis Robinson, where you have said that you have introduced some stems, or you didn't see stems in some cuvées. But in general, what is your views about winemaking? What are you looking for, and what is different in the winemaking that you are making today compared to what you were making at the beginning, let's say in 2000, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6? What's your view on that?
Well, it's difficult to say because it's not just one element. It could be two or three elements, but when you intermingle them, you cross two or three elements. You can get already 9 different results. So basically, I'm not doing a lot of different things. Um, so we it's all about the oxygen management. That has been, that's undoubtedly much more precise and much better. We've got more people in the cellar. We've got a lot more equipment since 2014, and so there's no comparison of what we're doing today compared to 10 years ago. So that's one thing. The stems is a different issue. The stems, but believe me, already since 2011, I was using a little bit of stems in the wines because 11 was quite a serious vintage, and so I did use them in, for example, the Cuvée Montecola, and I kind of liked it. Let's say I didn't dislike it. Let's put it this way, because at that time, I wasn't really sure whether I liked it or not. But let's say I did not dislike it. So it's interesting to really I don't know to think about it because in France, the whole bunch culture or the carbonic fermentation was so diffused and so much applied, and which I was never a really big fan of because you taste it, and at least for my taste, I was going to Beaujolais and then you went to the Rhone and you tasted a Petit Syrah and it was tasting basically like a Gamay. So I said, like, well, that is style. And when style becomes apparent and gets the overhand on terroir, then personally, that's where the line is. So another example, vin jaune. Vin jaune is style. Nobody puts a vineyard name on a vin jaune because it's an oxidation process which can make really fantastic wines to drink and with an incredible good comté. So it has all of that has a total perfect logic to it. But if you're talking about great winemaking, precise winemaking, then the style needs to support the wine through the gate of transformation into the expression of territory. And so, I've always been really picky and really wary about using this carbonic technique with stems because the stems, if they're green, they're tannic, they can be really harsh. In the aging, you always feel like a double decker on tannin level, the one from the fruit and the one from the stem. So but I had to try it because if you don't try it, you're talking theory. And so I tried first only stems, flipping them into it because we destemmed. So I took some stems out, washed them, rinsed them, cleaned them perfectly. I flipped them back in. And, it kind of worked. That was 2011. 2014, and I did some whole bunch, too little, and so I didn't notice it. And I said, like, well, that's fine, but I don't really find a difference. So, I really I wasn't paying too much attention. And then 2018, I had this really difficult vintage, and I used 20% of whole bunch. 20% is quite a lot, at least for my feeling. And it tasted a bit Beaujolais, if I can say that, carbonic, but not a lot. And so with the aging, I feel the fruit has become really nice because there was not much else in the wines. And so I reduced it a little bit. And today I'm using partly, I would say 10 to 20%, depending on the quality of the vintage and of the especially on the sugar levels and the alcohol levels. It was interesting to see that I think my wines have become a bit more approachable, extracted, but also fruity. And so I found, in my case, a better balance to have more, I would say, delicate and yeah, more balanced wines in the end. So it's a process.
I'm conscious about the timing. Frank, I will ask you one last question, and then we have a question from the audience. I will ask you a question which you can certainly spend a lot of time in answering, but maybe in one word, what you would say is, so today, if you want, if I am a vintner who wants to establish and make, let's say, organic / natural wine, um, how can I say that? Is it possible today to do that and make still a living with that? Um, so what's your opinion on that in one word? I mean, and again, we would need probably another 2
Well, yes, you can. It depends on the person. If you're driven enough, I would put it in few words. If you're enough masochistic, if you love suffering, and if you love the challenge of going totally bankrupt, and if you want to take those risks, then I would say go for it. It's great, but you're gonna sacrifice family. I hope that you don't have kids when you start with that. And then I think when you're also pretty egomaniac, I think you've got a chance to make it.
That sounds attractive. Thanks.
That's what it is.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Maybe we have a question from Paul, and I will ask a question. I will read the question for you.
Okay.
Paul is asking, as a visionary who helps creating modern Etna, what would you like to see for Etna with respect to viticulture 100 years from now?
Nice question. I would like to see two things. First of all, and this is not just Etna, but it's also Etna, that the littering stops and that we pay more attention in the schools. We've got 2 kids going to school, they're 10 and 12 years old. And I see that nothing much gets done about the essence of the littering. So a big problem in the South and in the Mediterranean, I think, is the littering. So if we can, in the next 20 years, if I can see that improve, that would be absolutely great. The second thing, and that's specific on Etna, I would love that the consortium, but we're talking about this, so I'm very confident we'll get to a point, to be able to make stone walls, not with huge big blocks, but like they used to be, the stone walls, like in Alto Adige, in northern Italy. When you make stone walls, like for example in Hermitage or in Cornas, when you make them with smaller rocks and stones, and it is craft. It's maybe a romantic idea, but it's so beautiful to see the stone walls built by hands of men, and it's a totally different thing. So I would love to see that more developed instead of having these big blocks and littering all over. I hate that.
That was the last word. I will turn back to Joy for closing. We are already at the end. It was very fast. I have to say.
Hi. Yeah, that did go really, really fast. Wonderful conversation. And I especially like that answer you just gave about the Paul Bologna's question. So I am going to close the room. I thank you both very, very, very much for coming on Clubhouse and giving us all that information. And it's a wonderful conversation. This will be replayed on the Italian Wine Podcast in the coming weeks. And of course, I'll let you both know when it will be published so you can tune in. And with that, buonasera, everybody.
Thanks
Thanks a
to all
lot.
of you.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
Ciao tutti.
Buonasera.
Here we go. Swirl, sniff, sip, spit. While you drink, don't forget.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Italian Wine Podcast, brought to you by Vinitaly Academy, home of the gold standard of Italian wine education. Do you want to be the next ambassador? Apply online at vinitalyinternational.com for courses in London, Austria, and Hong Kong, the 27th to the 29th of July. Remember to subscribe and like Italian Wine Podcast, and catch us on SoundCloud, Spotify, and wherever you get your pods. You can also find our entire back catalog of episodes at ItalianWinePodcast.com.
guys. I'm Joy Livingston, and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love, and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to ItalianWinePodcast.com.